Welcome to Canadian Coffee House Crime. My name is Catherine. Today's story is coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba, as I am here for a few weeks. This is story 2. Winnipeg, nicknamed the Gateway to the West, has a population of about 800,000 people. According to archaeologists, the site of the city was established around 6,000 years ago by Canadians' First Nation people. Winnipeg was incorporated as a city in 1873 by Canadian colonists, and by 1911 was considered to be Canada's third largest city. Its economic background was mainly fur trading and farming. Winnipeg has 4 major rivers: the Red River, the Assiniboine, the La Salle, and the Seine, and is subject to flooding due to its flat prairie terrain and giving the city a very humid climate with high temperatures in the summer and extreme cold winters. Winnie the Pooh was inspired by the mascot bear from the Canadian Army Reserve Regiment based out of Winnipeg. Her name was Winnipeg the Bear, a black female bear that lived from 1915 to 1934. As a cub, she was purchased at a train stop for about $20 from a hunter in Ontario by a veterinarian that was part of the regiment. If you're visiting Winnipeg, you can check out the Forks, a cultural shopping hub, the Manitoba Theatre Centre, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, which is the oldest ballet company in Canada, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, the Historic Manitoba Museum, the Winnipeg Zoo. You can probably find a show put on by Burton Cummings pretty much everywhere, who was the lead singer for the Guess Who. Other bands that originate from Winnipeg are the Crash Test Dummies, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Neil Young, The Watchmen, and Biff Naked. Seasonal attractions include the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Winnipeg Jets. In the early morning at 2 a.m. of Saturday, July 16th, 2011, police and the fire department were called to a 2.5-story rooming house at 288 Austin Street in the city's Point Douglas neighborhood, where a fire had broken out. A witness saw someone using something flammable to light a couch in front of the house. Neighbors and passing drivers noticed the blaze. A woman named Nicole said she spotted the fire as she drove by and called 911. She said she felt the heat from the house. While she waited for firefighters to arrive, she saw people running around in front of the building and screaming. She said it was really hard to watch. The front of the structure was engulfed when firefighters arrived. Fire officials said the blaze likely started near the front entrance, possibly on the veranda, blocking an obvious escape route. There were 8 people in the home at the time. 6 adults were rushed to the hospital in critical condition, including one who had received CPR at the scene. Those who died because of the blaze were Norman Darius Anderson, 22 years old, Maureen Claire Harper, 54, Kenneth Bradley Monkman, 49, Dean James Strandon, 44, Robert Curtis Lafotte, 56, all from Winnipeg. Rooming houses are often home to people struggling with addictions in Winnipeg. Officials say the house had 13 rooms and that they believed people were also sleeping in the basement. Apparently, the house had always been a house that was associated with activity of late-night partying, drugs, and so on. Winnipeg's deputy fire chief said the house had been subject of a fire safety investigation in the past month, but the problem had been corrected. He was actually quite surprised to hear of multiple casualties there because the fire prevention branch had been doing such a fantastic job in rooming houses. The city's arson strike force and police homicide unit investigated the fire. The cause of the fire was considered suspicious in nature. Damage was estimated at $100,000. The week before the fire, court records had shown a woman named Lulonda Flett had been ordered by the courts to stay away from one of the victims named Maureen Claire Harper, who was 54 years old at the time of the fire. Marie was a relative of Lulonda Flett. Lulonda had been handed a conditional sentence on assault charges after pleading guilty to participating with another woman in a 2009 attack on Maureen. Lulonda had been just cut loose from the remand center after being snatched up on an old warrant for the assault against Maureen. Lulonda Flett had no prior criminal record and was to take an anger management course. She was barred from being around the rooming house by virtue of court orders. Lulonda's Flett's sister-in-law, Lynette Harper, had escaped the fire unharmed. She escaped along with another resident named Marie Flett. The deceased Maureen Harper had told Lynette that they had argued about the circumstances of the fight that happened 20 months earlier that night, June 16th, at the rooming house. Someone had called police with regards to Lulonda's behavior. Lulonda Flett was arrested in a Main Street bar on the same day of Saturday, July 16, 2011. She was completely intoxicated and had to be told about what she did and the extent of harm done by the officers who had interviewed her. Lulonda Lynn Flett, 40 years old, was charged with 5 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder and 1 charge of arson. Lulonda was a disadvantaged and unsophisticated mother of 6, and she had become a mass killer. Lulonda Lynn Flett was born in 1971. She was the second youngest of 6 siblings. A 7th died as an infant. She was born at the hospital in Norway House and was brought back to her home community of St. Teresa Point. Her mother's doctor told her mom to give birth there because there was no appropriate medical facility in the small St. Teresa Point Reserve, one of 4 which makes up the overall community of Island Lake. A doctor visits there just once a month. In 2011, there were 521 homes in St. Teresa Point. 463 had no water service, and there's an 83% food insecurity rate. Who knows what it was like in 1971. Her mom was a community health worker, and her dad worked odd jobs to get their large family by. Her parents drank, which Lulonda thought was normal behavior. Her parents' parties often led her older sister to lock the younger kids in a bedroom. They'd watch TV or play music. Lulonda stated that her mom and dad would go on drinking binges to Winnipeg, sometimes staying there for months. Lulonda would be packed up to stay at her aunt's. Sometimes before she turned 10, Flett says an older relative began abusing her. She says she tried to tell her mother about what was happening but was accused of making it up and nobody believed her, so she stopped trying to tell them. Her mom ultimately quit drinking after Lulonda's father got sick with stomach ulcers and suffered kidney failure. At around 14 or 15 years old, Lulonda was sent away from St. Teresa Point to start school in Toulon at a residential school where nuns ruled the roost. Her sister, an elder protector, was also there. Raised in a home where OG Cree was the main dialect, Flett had to adjust her tongue to the English language as the nuns wouldn't tolerate a word being uttered in any other language. Nonetheless, Lulonda got good marks and enjoyed school. School represented a refuge from the relative chaos at home, and she also enjoyed playing sports. The sister had a different view, saying she dropped out at one point but was convinced to return. Around this point, Lulonda took her first drink. She met a young man named Brian and became pregnant. This was 1986 to 87. Ventured into Winnipeg and had the baby at Villa Rosa. Wanting to return to high school, arrangements were made for her to live with a relative in Brandon to complete grade 11. It didn't work out as planned. Lulonda said that the relative's drinking problem paved her a road back to St. Teresa. She still hoped to finish grade 12 and find a job at the local nursing station. Seems the challenges of life as a new mom didn't allow that to happen as time wore on. By 18, she married her husband-to-be, a man whom she's had 5 children. By 22, Lulonda was married, and they went to live at his parents' home in nearby Garden Hill. She was an active and supportive parent to her children, but around this time, things started to get ugly for her. Her husband insisted that she drink with him, forced her to drink super juice, which is a home brew seen as a plague in the dry island lake community. Her husband also insisted Lulonda smoke weed and later crack cocaine. They'd smoke up marijuana almost daily and come home from work over lunch to get high. The marriage and substance sharing didn't appear to make the bond between them stronger. Lulonda said her husband became very abusive on a physical, sexual, and emotional level. She said he also says he cheated and couldn't keep a job. Her husband would lock her in the house, take her shoes, and remove the phone so that she couldn't contact anyone or run away. He would hit her with objects and also burnt her with a cigarette. She was called Raccoon Eyes because of the bruising from the reported assaults. There was an incident in which he assaulted her and then dragged her across a path of rough ground. He was charged and served 6 months in lockup. When he went back with Lulonda, the violence continued and it was worse. It was a cycle. She kept going back to him. He had apologized and convinced her he'd never do it again. She berated herself for believing him time and again. Lulonda's kids begging her not to go back to him because he was going to kill her one day. He left for Thompson, Manitoba. She stayed in St. Teresa Point and worked at the community northern store and managed to acquire her certificates in home care support work and first aid along the way. But now her drinking got worse. Having never claimed any federal benefits for the kids, Flett was handed a $14,000 child benefits check. Lulonda started dating another man from her community. They met in Winnipeg while he was on a drinking trip one day to the city. The two were inseparable, spending all their time together. Lulonda was paying for her kids' needs, helping to fix up her mom's home. But her boyfriend was an alcoholic. He'd panhandle or borrow cash from a relative to get by. Eventually, he started siphoning money out of Lulonda, and the relationship took a dark turn. Lulonda returned to the city to be with her boyfriend and started paying for his wants, alcohol, and they survived on family and friends as she had no real address. Her boyfriend was very controlling over money, Lulonda especially as the money dried up. Lulonda was now on welfare and they were drinking constantly. Not seeing the drinking as a problem, Lulonda never sought treatment. Her kids urged her to take it easy, but even these pleas didn't trigger a desire to seek change. It was around here that someone made a call to Child and Family Services while Lulonda was in the throes of a drinking binge. Her children were taken away. One was already living with an aunt. 2 others went to live with her mom. The others went to the dad. She thinks the dad made the call to Child and Family Services. The alcohol abuse only escalated after the kids were removed from her care. She was lonely and depressed and angry at herself. She didn't care about herself anymore. She was drinking up to a 2 6-ounce bottle of liquor daily up until the day after her arrest. Lulonda pleaded guilty in October 2012, and on June 13, 2013, Lulonda Flett was sentenced to 5 life sentences. one for each case of manslaughter, but to be served concurrently. The judge said she considered all of Lulonda's cognitive challenges and difficulties in life. However, she also believed Flett intended to cause harm to two women in the fire, even if she didn't intend the full catastrophic consequences of her actions. Lulonda Flett left the courtroom in tears. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Catherine, and this is Canadian Coffeehouse Crime, video number 31 on August 5th, 2023. This concludes Story 2 from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Please feel free to press the like button as it helps with my exposure, and subscribe to my channel. I try to put out a new video every week. See you in the next case.
Lulonda Flett was given 5 life sentences for setting the fatal fire, to be served at the same time. She's eligible for parole in 5 years.
I don't think she deserves that. I think she should spend her life in there.
Harper says she's outraged by the court ruling. She and her mother escaped that deadly fire. They lived on the main floor. Marie Flett says her daughter was the target. Lulonda was convicted of assaulting Lynette before. And she says Lulonda dated her son, and that night she told him what she planned to do.
I'm gonna go burn your mom's house. I'm gonna go burn it.
Harper says she had just gone to bed and heard crackling. She got up and saw flames under the door. She ran to her mom and got her outside.
I was screaming, Norman, Norman. I thought he was gonna make it up.
She says police officers had to pin her down so she wouldn't run back in. The mother and daughter say everyone who died in the house were their friends. One was Marie Flett's cousin.
She took so many lives and ruined so many families.
Harper says she'll never forgive Flett for taking away the love of her life. Jillian Taylor, CBC News, Winnipeg,